progress.
Good evening. Welcome. The April 18th meeting of the Richmond Planning Commission is now in session. Could we have the roll call?
Certainly. Secretary Brubaker,
Here.
Commissioner Loy,
Here.
Commissioner He,
Here.
and Commissioner Golovitz.
Here.
And I would just like to note that Vice Chair Harrison, Commissioners Timmons, and Agarwal are absent. We do have quorum.
Thank you. Do you want to do staff introductions?
Yes, with you tonight, you have Hector Rojas, Planning Manager. In the audience, you have Community Development Director, Lena Velasco.
Okay, so our first item is minutes for approval. There are two sets of minutes from February 1, 2024, and from November 16, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Do we need to vote on this?
Yes, please. And I'll call off the roll. Secretary Brubaker,
Yes.
Commissioner Loy,
Yes.
Commissioner He,
Yes.
and Commissioner Golovitz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Brown Act. No, consent calendar. However, there are no items on the consent calendar. So we will have Brown Act speakers. Let's see, should I read the item for the Brown Act? Is there anybody who has signed up to speak?
Currently, we do not have any Brown Act speakers here in person. However, I do see a number of folks in the audience. I assume they're from the applicants, but would like to make an announcement that if you'd like to speak on an item that is not on our agenda tonight, you may go to your left-hand side there and fill out a speaker card, hand those to me, and you'll be recognized. As well as for our online members of the audience that are participating tonight, if you'd like to speak under the Brown Act, please use your raise hand feature, and we'll go ahead and provide you the opportunity to speak. So I'll allow for a couple seconds here. Again, the raise hand feature is located at the bottom of your Zoom app. And Secretary Brubaker, I do not see any raised hands online.
None heard, thank you. The next item is a study session. Would the staff like to introduce the item?
Yes, I'll allow the applicants to come and approach the mic there, but item number 1 is PLN 23-206, Chevron Modernization Project Annual Compliance Report. This will be a presentation on the Chevron Refinery Modernization Project Annual Compliance Report pursuant to condition of approval H5 of conditional use permit PLN 11-089 at 841 Chevron Way / 100 Chevron Way. The applicant and owner here is Chevron USA, division of Chevron USA Incorporated, and the assigned planner is Lena Velasco. So I'll turn it over to Lena for the presentation.
Good evening, Secretary Brubaker, Commissioners, Lena Velasco, Director of Community Development, and I'm joined this evening by the city's consultant from Ramble. I have Dr. Sherry Labicki as well as Sarah Manzano, who have both supported the city in the evaluation of the Chevron Annual Compliance Report. So just as a little bit of background, this is a required annual report that's given to the Planning Commission. This is the 6th annual report that we've provided the commission as it relates to this project. And the information will be related mostly to the calendar year 2022. And so what we'll do is we'll go through the presentation. We will have some remarks from Chevron, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. So with that, I will hand it off to Rambo.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. This is our review of the Chevron Refinery Modernization Annual Compliance Report. The recommended action here is to receive the staff and consultant presentation of the Modernization Project's Annual Compliance Report and receive and provide comments on the Annual Compliance Report. As an overview, the modernization project consists of construction of the new hydrogen plant and a collection of new equipment improvements that remove naturally occurring sulfur contained in feedstocks processed at the facility, including modifications to the refinery's existing sulfur recovery units, sometimes known as SRUs. The project includes infrastructure improvements to facility piping, utility lines, and electrical systems. The project also includes project design features, or PDFs, and mitigation measures to achieve the no net increase in criteria air pollutants, otherwise known as CAPs, and toxic air contaminants, otherwise known as TACs, and no physical increase in greenhouse gas emissions. This is the project site. I think you're all probably pretty familiar with it. The entire refinery takes place on both sides of the highways. You'll see that the dock is on the south side of the highway, but the majority of the refinery is on the north side. And as you'll see, the project itself takes place on the north side. Go ahead. These are the project components. In gray is the construction area. In kind of that reddish brown are the storage tank area, and in gray is the refinery process area. And each of those little numbers represent part of the project, and the colors designate which part of the project they are. The city certified an EIR and approved a conditional use permit for the project in 2014. For context, we were the city's consultant on that project, and I, in fact, was one of the city's consultants on that project. The conditional use permit requires that every year, beginning after the first full year project construction, Chevron submit to the city an annual compliance report documenting compliance with the conditions of approval and the mitigation measures in the EIR. This is the 6th annual compliance report on the modernization project, covering operations and some minimal construction activities in 2022. So there are two pieces to this. There's the report, which you have, and then there's the Chevron report, which can be accessed at the website below. This is a project that consists of lots of agencies looking over various aspects of the project. It includes the City of Richmond Fire Department, the Contra Costa Health Services, City of Richmond Building and Planning Services Department, environmental consultants, Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and the City of Richmond Engineering and Capital Improvement Projects. All of these groups and agencies were also involved in the preparation of the conditional use permit. There are 4 phases of the project for the purposes of compliance. There's pre-construction, which is obviously finished since construction has already started. There's construction, most of which is complete. There are some small pieces that are left. There's pre-operation, which has to be complete before operations start, and then there are operations, which is ongoing. In 2022, there were minimal construction activities. There is a little bit of ongoing construction. The old hydrogen plant dismantling commenced in the third quarter of 2022. Since the last update, there was an additional tank dome added, and the tank dome is a mitigation project to reduce volatile organic compounds from being emitted. The GHG construction mitigation project, which was the marsh pump replacement, was completed in the first quarter of 2022. There is potential future construction, including modifications to the FCC FHT, the fluid catalytic cracker feed hydrotreater, that was envisioned as part of the project. So the 2022 and future construction is shown here with 4 gold stars, and they're shown in various places. They include the tank doming, which is in the red area there, the marsh pumps, which is all the way to the right, and then the 2 process area construction that we talked about earlier. Go ahead. In 2018, construction-related greenhouse gas emissions were over the EIR threshold, and that required mitigation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to less than significant under the mitigation measure listed here. In December 2019, the city approved the permanent replacement of 3 Tier 2, and the tier refers to how much pollution control is on it. Higher the tier, the more pollution control. Diesel pumps in the marsh area with electric pumps. The proposal was reviewed and deemed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the amount necessary to offset construction emissions. The preliminary work began on this project in 2022. In order to expedite the greenhouse gas reduction, the permanent diesel-powered pumps were replaced by 4 rented temporary electric pumps until the permanent pumps were placed into service. That was done in 2022, and they have been in place since the first quarter of 2022. In terms of construction, all the obligations have been met and verified by the compliance team. Chevron will continue to submit quarterly reports until the project construction is complete. Once we have a full year where there is no construction, this construction part of the report will go away because there will have been no more construction. Chevron tracks construction emissions using the construction emissions model, which we developed on behalf of the city. The conditions of approval implemented during this phase include construction management standards, construction worker training, and construction emission tracking. Attachments 1 and 2 to the annual report document compliance with the MMRP and the CUP conditions of approval. Greenhouse gas emissions from construction were 12 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2022. To give you context, that's about the greenhouse gas emissions of 1 to 2 households. 2022 was the 3rd full year of operations of the new hydrogen plant and sulfur recovery improvements. This is the 4th annual report addressing operational requirements, and all obligations for the 2022 operational year were met and verified by the city compliance team. That is us. Go ahead. Just as an overview for operations in 2022, there was no net increase in criteria pollutants, and no net increase in health risks from the toxic air contaminants. Emissions are tracked in an air quality tracking tool developed by us again. There is no physical increase in greenhouse gas emissions from the baseline. We should note that the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions that we use are verified by the California Air Resources Board. And so Chevron submits them to the Air Resources Board, CARB validates them, and then we use those. The facility's overall utilization was 64%, and that's below the 93% utilization scenario in the EIR that would trigger additional mitigation. This shows the emissions from 2022 put next to the baseline emissions, and then the 2022 emissions compared to baseline. You can see in every case they're below, and some cases well below the baseline threshold. And then the facility utilization, as I described in 2022, was 64%, as opposed to the threshold of 93%. Compliance for ongoing very limited construction activities is tracked and submitted quarterly to the city. Operations compliance is achieved via the annual compliance report, as all operational mitigation measures and conditions of approval on an annual basis. As you would note when you look at the report, it's about 450 pages, so there's a lot of record keeping in there. We verify compliance, which includes the detailed review of the annual report, and in-person and virtual meetings with Chevron and cross-checking emissions data with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District flare monitoring data. I should note that this year Chevron reported to us a small error in the emissions tracking tool usage, not the tool itself, but how the tool was used. They discovered a transcription error in calendar year 2022. We looked at that error, evaluated whether it would affect emissions previously. It did in a small way. Those details are in the staff report that you have. It did not impact any conclusions. So that the small changes in emissions that resulted from this and other small errors that we found when we went back and did an exhaustive review were all relatively small when compared to the baseline. So there was no change in conclusion, no significant changes in emissions. There you see, and also in your report, we list the very detailed issues that we found when we went back and did a very thorough evaluation of previous years. So the refinery is required to notify the city of hydrogen plant flaring events greater than 500,000 standard cubic foot per year. The city has verified that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District also receives the flaring notifications, and we've done a comparison between what the city was notified by and the BAQMD tracking. It is consistent. And of course, as a part of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District regulations, they asked for more detailed reports on why the flaring occurred, and we were able to confirm that those reports are filed with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District as well. The future actions is that Chevron will continue to prepare an annual compliance report and submit it to the city by September 1st of each year. The report will then be reviewed and submitted to the Planning Commission. As I mentioned earlier, once an obligation has been fulfilled and it is no longer relevant for the reporting year, we will be pulling it out of the reports just to make the reports clear and easier to read. And that website shows you where you can find the full 450-plus page report. Go ahead. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Secretary Brubaker, before we move to questions, Tom Leeds of Chevron also wanted to provide a brief summary of their annual compliance.
Okay, so we'll have this summary from Chevron, then we'll have commissioner questions, and then we'll have public comment.
Correct.
And return it to the commission.
Good evening, Secretary Brubaker and fellow commissioners. I'm Tom Leeds, Operations Manager at the Distillation Reforming Unit at the Chevron Richmond Refinery. I'm joined by my colleagues. I got Brandon Sutter, he's our Modernization Compliance Specialist, and Hakeem Johnson and Brian Hubbinger, our Public Affairs Representatives. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you tonight to provide you the annual update on the modernization project, which you have heard from the staff has resulted in positive impacts in our journey to a newer, safer, and cleaner Chevron Richmond. We're proud of a team who continue to work hard to safely and responsibly produce energy needed to meet current demands, such as about 60% of the jet to the major Bay Area airports, as well as about 20% of the gasoline in Northern California. But let me start with the modernization project update for 2022 by first thanking city staff and this body for being collaborative and professional partners throughout the life of this project, which is designed to create a newer, safer, and cleaner Chevron Richmond. And thanks to city staff for providing the report. We started construction in June of 2016 and completed the primary construction of the new hydrogen plant and the sulfur removal improvements in 2019. In 2022, we completed the installation of 6,000 LED lights estimated to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions at our facility by at least 339 tons of CO2 equivalents per year. We also completed secondary construction activities under the project's conditional use permit and the mitigation monitoring reporting program, which included the doming of a tank, the last of the 3 required by the project, which resulted in reduced air emissions, and the completion of the greenhouse gas construction mitigation project, which replaced those 4 diesel-driven pumps with electric pumps. The refinery invested another $6 million last year to the local community to support economic development, education, and other Richmond community programs through Chevron's Community Investment Agreement, bringing us to $76 million invested since 2014. Flaring at our hydrogen plant was similar between 2022 and 2021, but still much lower when the plant was being commissioned. It was an 85% reduction in flare volume at the hydrogen plant since 2019. For the non-hydrogen flares, we reduced flaring by 85% in 2022 compared to 2021. It was also our lowest volume flared since 2018. While these numbers show positive downward trend in our flare performance, we can still improve, and we continue to work further to minimize flaring at our facility. Note that the report being discussed today is based on 2022 data. The 2023 data has not yet been verified, but we continue to operate in line with the EIR. With modernization startup, we became subject to additional compliance requirements, including new emission limits and implementation of a reliability program. Since operations commenced in 2019, we have stayed well within our emission commitments of no net increase in criteria air pollutants, no net increase in health risk from toxic air contaminants, and no physical increase in greenhouse gas emissions over the baseline emissions established for the project. Additionally, our team works very closely with the Contra Costa Health Services to fully implement and ensure compliance with the reliability program. The modernization project has helped reduce refinery-wide particulate matter, or PM emissions, by greater than 30% since 2018 due to new, more efficient equipment. We believe the modernization project is a great example of how we can reduce the carbon intensity of our products and reduce air emissions overall. More than $76 million has already gone toward funding environmental, college scholarship, and community programs through Chevron's Community Investment Agreement that support the economic development, education, and other Richmond community programs. As a reminder, this investment is in addition to our annual local social investment, which exceeded $1.5 million in 2022. This has enabled 3,300 scholarships through $35 million in seed funding for Richmond Promise. One of the statistics we're most excited about is 64% of those scholars are first-generation college students and 91% are people of color. According to the city, this funding has already enabled annual greenhouse gas reductions of more than 400,000 metric tons through energy efficiency projects for small and medium businesses. Also, the Carlson Boulevard crosstown improvements are expected to reduce emissions by 271 million tons of carbon dioxide over 15 years. Modernization is an important part of how we're advancing a lower carbon future in Richmond, and we're not stopping here on our journey to a lower carbon energy future. We believe the future of energy is lower carbon, so we're working on additional energy transition and lower carbon projects. We'd like to partner with the city, labor unions, and other stakeholders as we progress these exciting projects. We are excited to engage city staff and this body on future projects that will enable well-paying jobs and be the cornerstone of a lower carbon future in Richmond. Chevron invested more than $1 billion into Richmond for the modernization project. For 120 years, we've shared a proud heritage with our community. Our talented team of operators, engineers, scientists, and other professionals are thrilled to partner with the city to continue to safely produce affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner transportation fuels. We're proud of projects like modernization that allow Chevron Richmond to improve environmental performance while helping to meet the energy demands of California families. We're looking forward to a bright future together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks. Bringing it up to the commission, do we have any questions for the applicant, for the staff, or for Chevron?
I have one question for consultants. The baseline for the emission, is that adjusted for use lower than 93%, or is it an absolute number?
So it's strictly a mass emissions rate. And Chevron can meet that lower baseline any way they choose, including lower production.
Okay, so that doesn't mean that they use better technology, it just means that the absolute number is lower.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of roughly see that for the most part, the emissions are lower than the the ratio between the current usage and the future usage. So you can see that there is actually better technology for the most part. The place it doesn't come out in is VOCs, because the VOC emissions are just independent of usage, and that the way they're calculated.
Thank you.
Other questions?
How was the baseline determined? It was part of the EIR, right?
That's right.
Yeah, what metrics were used to calculate that baseline?
So, consistent with CEQA, the baseline was a 3-year average of the previous years, right? It's a standard CEQA baseline. So, for every CEQA report, every kind of project approval you have, they should have a baseline for air emissions. And that baseline for this facility was calculated exactly the same way.
Other questions, Commissioner Heath? I have a couple. First, a very broad question. In your professional opinion as a consultant, do you think that Chevron is living up to the commitments in its agreement with the city?
I'm going to stick to my little world, right? Because I don't like to walk outside of
Please don't.
what I do. In my little world, in the air quality world, yes. And that's exactly what this is intended to do.
Yeah. I think I asked this the last time we saw you folks, but just to confirm that Ramble is a consultant engaged by the city, probably paid by Chevron, but independently hired by the city and working independently with the city to do this report. Is that correct?
Right. So we have been hired by the city and working for the city since 2011. My check comes from the city. I'm presumably reimbursed by Chevron, but my check actually does come from the city. And when I say my check, of course, I mean my company's check, not my check per se. And since that time, we have not engaged with Chevron in any way at this location.
A couple other questions. One is about the marsh pumps. It's good news that those are no longer diesel and they're no longer temporary pumps. Now they're permanent electrical pumps. I wonder what the marsh pumps actually do. Maybe it's Chevron that needs to answer that, but I just wonder, what is the reason for the marsh pumps?
I can give you a high level list. By no
I guess
means
that's a left field question.
Yeah, I
but-
know. This one caught us. I'm looking around. Who can do it better? They voted me. We move water around. We have a lot of in our environmental area. So these truly are. We have water retention ponds, I guess is how I would describe it. And these pumps actually move water from these different retention ponds that we have that are out there when you saw the map, it's kind of where she showed that star was kind of out in the middle. It just looks like marshlands, and it really truly is just moving water out of these different holding areas that we have that we move water around. We do all the sampling and testing and that kind of stuff. So it truly is just moving water around out there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One additional question about the criteria pollutants. So that's a measurement that you took. Is it verified by BACMUD, or do they look at your work?
So this is a little complicated, so stick with me here. The inputs into the model that calculate emissions for the purposes of the EIR are the same inputs that go to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for their inventory. In order to ensure that we have an apples-to-apples comparison with the baseline numbers, we keep the same calculation methods that we did for the EIR. Since that time, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has changed the way they do calculations. But we didn't want to give Chevron any benefit of calculational change, nor should they be penalized for a calculational change. And so the Bay Area validates the inputs, but not the emissions calculations itself. That's our job. Does that help?
Okay. So they are involved in the process, but not necessarily in the actual numbers that result from the process.
Correct.
Okay, a couple others. You mentioned that the city had some finding, the city found and agreed on something, I don't remember what the reference was, and I'm wondering who at the city actually does that, makes that finding?
I'm not quite sure.
I don't remember the slide.
A translation error did not result in a change of pollution or emissions. Data, a tool. It was a tool.
Oh, so I think they're referring to the new calculations don't change the conclusions.
Yeah, so Chevron found an error. We went back and we said, okay, let's look at everything really carefully again. Again, the error was such that the emissions difference was small relative to the baseline, but there's a little, it's a little bit like grocery receipts. When I find an error, I walk back in and I say, okay, what else did we miss? And so we did a thorough evaluation of everything, you know, going back to the original documents. And when the recalculation was done, and you have that actually in the report that you have, the conclusion was not different. The numbers were slightly different, and you can see that in your report, but the conclusion wasn't different. And so that was an evaluation that we made. We also, the way that we did this kind of exhaustive calculation is we put in for next year a way to basically tear off of this year's checks to ensure that next year is correct.
Okay, so it's really Ramboll who's doing all of this work, and the city is kind of overseeing or reviewing your work
That's correct.
as it comes.
Right, you know, and by way of example, you know, we would do the work, we'd come back to the city and say, okay, here's what we found, you know, and the city would say, well, did you check this? Did you do that? You know, are you comfortable with this? And so it was an integrated process in that respect.
So a question for staff, for Lena. Do you check that, or who is it at the city? Is it yourself?
Yes, it's been me, because I've been carrying this for a while, but as we, you know, we've had, and part of it is we're delayed in coming before you all. Some of it was due to lack of staffing and us needing to complete it, but then, you know, also when we had intended to come back early in the year, we had a quorum issue with, and then it just got delayed further. But yes, so what I've been doing is meeting with Ramboll on a regular basis first we meet with Chevron to talk about the annual compliance and set the deadlines. And, you know, they'll submit their report, we review it, ask any specific questions where clarifications may be needed. And then as the review is occurring, similar to how we would manage with other consultants, we're meeting regularly, they're bringing issues, we're providing direction on clarification and next steps, and then we draw the conclusions together in the drafting of the staff report.
Okay, thank you, that sounds reasonable. Last question, here I'm going to rather channel our previous chair, David Tucker. You mentioned construction that took place is not maybe a technical question, but rather a condition of approval question. Are there worker goals in terms of local hiring and other programs that the city has that were met by Chevron or not met by Chevron in the construction work that happened in 2022? Do you know?
So the agreement under I believe it's the Environmental Community Investment Agreement, there is a target to do local hire, local procurement in there. And so as part of the reporting, they do note that. I'd have to see what we found in the report.
Yeah, it's actually in that report that's on the website, the 450 plus pages. There's, gosh, I want to say more than 50 pages on the hiring.
Okay. Thank you. If no one else has any questions, we can open it for public comment.
Yes, at this time, I don't see any speaker cards from folks here in the audience. There's also no hands raised online.
Okay. Well, if there's, I guess, no public comment, no other questions, I think we can conclude this session. This is not an item that we need to take a motion on, I don't believe. We've made comments. Is there?
Yes, that's correct. The recommendation is to receive the presentation and provide comments.
Okay, and we've done so. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will move on to commission business, which has two items, one of which is election of officers.
Yes, and so the nominating committee met earlier last week, I believe, and so has devised a slate of nominations. However, after review of our bylaws, I noticed that the elections are to be had in July, so we'll go ahead and postpone the elections until then. So that's number two, and then as far as number three, reports from officers, commissioners, and staff, I don't have a report, just wanted to make you aware that we will be holding the May 2nd meeting, which will be the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission. We do have two items.
Okay, two items, May 2nd.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any commissioners that have any business? Yes, Commissioner.
I usually try to lift up something going on in the community, and I'll just say that Earth Day is coming up, and there's lots going on in the Richmond community. So if you have time and energy, all you have to do is search the internet for Richmond and Earth Day, and you will find lovely things to do with your family or your own self or yourself and your dog. Please get out there and do something with our community in this beautiful weather. That's it.
And remind us, it's Saturday, right? The
Yes.
Earth Day.
Yes.
Okay.
It's Saturday this year.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Okay, with that, commissioners, I get to do this. I've never done it before, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.